Ben Merens has been a professional journalist for 32 years. He spent 21 of those years as a talk show host at Wisconsin Public Radio. He currently is the director of Podcast Network International and a media director in Milwaukee. He did interview Dawn, who is here with us today, and she was featured on his podcast some time ago. If you haven't heard it, I highly recommend listening. It is related to human trafficking. Ben, you have the floor.
Good morning, Michelle. Good morning, everybody else. Thank you for sitting in and having me here this morning for me and this afternoon for some of you. Time waits for no man or woman. I've actually been working in the field for 40 years now, and I apologize. I didn't send the updated bio, and be fair to the Vistelar group, I'm not with them anymore. I'm pretty much working as an independent consultant, teaching storytelling, teaching impromptu speech. And I capture stories every day as a case manager with the health department of the city of Milwaukee. For the last year, I've been helping people deal with COVID. So I'm thrilled to be able to talk about story, and I'm trying to figure out how to cut it down just to 15 or 20 minutes because I know how busy you all are, and I have so many things I'd like to get to. So let's talk about a couple quick things. Storytelling needs two components: a storyteller and a story listener. I owe a great debt of gratitude to Rotary because when I left the Vistelar group, I went to the Blood Research Institute, which is the research arm of the Wisconsin Blood Center. And they wanted me to work on the philanthropy team, but not to raise money, just to raise awareness. So when the man who brought me in to do this left, I wasn't sure how I should go about sharing the story of the research that we do. And I knocked on the door of Rotary. In 18 months, 50 Rotaries welcomed me in to allow me to hone my story and promote what we were doing in the community. And for that, I felt a great debt of gratitude. And that's where I met Dawn, and we talked about human trafficking, which I thought happened somewhere else, but certainly not in Wisconsin. And I was after I left public radio, I did a local radio show for 5 years weekly, and Dawn joined me. And I'm still happy and proud to tell you that was the most listened to show I've ever done there. And I'm sure it's more due to Dawn's promotion of it than my work there. But the fact that subject had so many people's attention. We talked earlier about building community and membership. And there are two ways to do that. We can sit next to each other in the room and you build community. Or we can connect globally and build community by sharing our stories. And it is, in my thinking, that's where the heart of this work is when we were talking about membership and how do you get to know each member. And I think the best way to do that is to get to know a story about them. So what is their personal mission when you talk about how your mission fits in to why they're joining you? And you only get that through hearing their story. The story that I told Rotary for 18 months was simply that this boss, Michael, who left the company unexpectedly, had me sitting there thinking, what am I going to do now that my mentor is gone? And on the way home that particular day, I had to get a new screensaver for my phone. And I went to Verizon, and there was a guy there named Ricky. And he said, hey, I'm Ricky. Can I help you? And I looked at him and said, Ricky, I was in a hurry and a bad mood. So I said, I just want a screensaver for my phone. And he said, well, are you a corporate member? Because I was dressed in a suit and tie. I said, I don't know, but I don't care. I just want the screensaver. He says, well, yeah, where do you work? I said, I work at the blood center. He goes, I had a blood transfusion once. I said, I just want the screensaver, Ricky. He goes, do you have your ID with you? I said, well, it's in the car. He goes, do you want to get it? No, but I did. He saved me 10% on my monthly Verizon bill because we were corporate members. He saved me 20% on my purchase that day. But more importantly, he said, he told me I was getting these financial breaks. I said, boy, I feel lucky. I feel kind of blessed. He goes, well, I'm blessed. Now that's a man ringing a bell, dying to tell you why. So I could either just take my screensaver or practice what I preach because I figured there's a story here. I just didn't know how good a story. He said, I'm a double lung transplant survivor. He looked really good. He should. He got 2 new lungs, but in my thinking, he wouldn't look so good. He was about 40. Slender, 150, 60 pounds, about 5'6". I said, wow, that's pretty incredible. He goes, yeah, you want to know something else? I'm thinking, what else could you tell me? He goes, I married my nurse. Pretty good. Married his nurse, double lung transplant survivor. And I asked, could he exercise with the new lungs? He goes, you mean like go to the gym and work out and stuff? I said, yeah. He goes, I could. I don't. But I get my exercise, with the kids. I go, you have kids? He goes, yeah, we got 3 kids. We have twin 5-year-olds and a 10-month-old. And you know what else? Every time he says this, the bells are ringing. He says the twins were born at 24 weeks. And I didn't know twins could survive at 24 weeks. I said, how are they? He goes, oh, they're great. Well, they have some, cerebral palsy, one of them, and autism, but they're great. He's a very optimistic guy. And he said, when they were born, one of my daughters, and we named one Story and the other Sage. And Sage wasn't doing well. She was on a machine, and the doctor told me 3 days after she was born, it was time to make a hard decision. And he said, Doc, I know where you're going. I'm a man of faith, and I am not going to do anything but allow my faith and your good work to help my daughter survive. And the doctor looked at him. He said, Ricky, I too am a man of faith, but I'm also a man of science, and I know you've got another daughter and your wife, they need you. And this is not going to have a great outcome. I've seen this before. He goes, Doc, we're done talking. I'm a man of faith, and I want you to do the best work you can, and I know you will. You ask me, Ben, if I get at my exercise. I chase both of those little girls around. Now they're 5 years old. I get my exercise. You bet I do. Now, one of the nice things about getting a story like that is that I can then turn around and give him a story that will help him too. At this point, it was, do you know why you're standing here today? And he looked at me, what do you mean? And I said, where I work, back in the early 70s, they found a way to use science to tamp down your immune system and allow you to accept an organ that's being donated and transplanted into you. Normally, your body wouldn't accept it. And we did that here in Milwaukee. We did that less than a mile from where you and I are standing right now. That's why you're here today. And he goes, that's amazing. I said, no, that's good science. What's amazing is that you married your nurse. You've got 3 children. You are standing here as optimistic and healthy as anybody I've ever met. That's what is amazing. So with a great story, there is an epilogue. So about a year ago, he posted that he now needs a kidney. He's like, what this poor guy has to go through just to be here. Well, it turns out that nurse he married also is a perfect match. And he now has one of his wife's kidneys in him, and they are thriving. These stories come about because we take the time to listen to them. I could have really pushed by, and he would have been okay with it. I would have been much poorer for not knowing the story. To hone at the tell of the story, again, I'm in debt to Rotary because 50 of you, organizations in the Southeast Wisconsin area, welcomed me in with open arms and let me tell this story. Our stories, when I teach how to tell stories, I teach 2 main things you should keep in mind. 99% of what you have to say, most of us have no time or interest in. What's your 1% when you tell your story? Especially in the virtual world, we tend to have a little less focus and time online than we would sitting next to each other with a cup of coffee. What's your 1%? And that doesn't have to be the same 1% every time you tell a story. It just has to be the most important part. And if they want more, great. But if they don't, at least you gave them something of value. The second part of that is that once upon a time isn't just how we put our kids to bed. It's where we start our stories. So where's the story start? That's what may hook you in, or may cause you not to tune in case you miss the story. And we don't want that. There is a movie called Sliding Doors. It wasn't a great movie, but it's I tell a story about it all the time because in the movie, Gwyneth Paltrow is the lead actress and she is in London. She loses her job in advertising and she is about to get on the tube to go home. She lives with her boyfriend. He's a writer. He's also cheating on her. So as the movie progresses, he's having a dalliance in the morning and she is trying to get home, having just been very unexpectedly fired. As she goes down the stairs to get to the tube just before she gets to the bottom of the stairs, as the tube is pulled into the station, this little boy walking up the stairs with his mother pulls away from his mother. It causes Gwyneth Paltrow to stop for 1 second. In that 1 second, the door of the train closes. It leaves the station, and she misses the train. The boyfriend finishes, cleans up the apartment. She gets on the train, gets home, and everything is fine. But then the story does something very interesting. It starts over again as she goes down the stairs. The little boy starts to pull away, and the mother grabs his wrist. He doesn't get away. She makes the train. She catches the boyfriend. Her whole life is different. Now the movie does something I really love. You see both stories, where she makes the train and where she misses the train. In our lives, you either make the train or you miss the train. It's 1 second. It's one moment. All of our lives have a million of these moments. And when we share our story, we have to decide, what's the moment I need to start with? And when we gather our stories, when you gather the stories of your members and of your prospective members, you hear their stories because their stories validate their journey. None of us on this call are probably under 30, maybe you are, but if you make it 30 to 70 years, you've done something pretty amazing. How did you get there? That story is going to help others, both old and young, figure out how they're going to get there. Which brings me to the story of Rose. Rose was in a nursing home, and I was presenting to nurses about how to listen. I said, I can't give you more time with your patients, but I can give you a better way to maximize the time you've got, to make it more efficient, to get the information from your clients or your patients. And this nurse told me the story of Rose. She was working at a nursing home, and they have meetings before the shift change. And somebody was complaining about Rose. Rose seemingly had early onset dementia, was pretty good all day, but when you got her into the dining hall at night, she lost it. They'd sit her down at the table, and she'd bang her hands on the table. They didn't want her to eat in a room, but they couldn't allow her to do what she was doing. Well, this new nurse said, can I look into her background? I think we're missing something. I don't know what it is. She found out pretty quickly Rose had been the hostess of the family restaurant for 40 years. As the dementia kind of kicked in at the end of the day, she just got a little lost. She'd be walked into the dining hall and asked to sit down, which the room had become in her mind the restaurant. And a hostess never sits down and eats when everyone's there. So this nurse said, why don't we make her the hostess of the dining hall? Let's get a podium at the door. She can greet people, help seat them, get them extra coffee, a fork, a napkin, piece of pie for dessert. And they did. And at the end of the night, they had the foresight to set up a little table in the back of the dining hall, kind of like they did at the restaurant. They brought her meal out with a silver warmer cover that you'd see in like hotels for room service. And she sat there and she quietly put her hands over her plate and said her prayers and ate her meal. And they solved two problems. One, little extra help in the dining hall. And two, they showed her the utmost respect. They found out what her story was. And once you've done that, you can act on it. In this case, they made her feel worthy at a time when she really needed it and deserved it. I had a great Uncle Max. I tell his story because I want to honor him with respect and because it fits into the Rose story. When Max was in his last couple of years, he ended up in a nursing home, and I went to go see him. And I said at the front desk when I couldn't find him, I'm looking for Max Phillips. I'm his nephew. And the nurse said, who? Max Phillips? And she was relatively new. The other nurse said, oh, you mean 301B? And it was like somebody had hit me in the stomach. I said, don't call him that. He's Max Phillips. He's my uncle. He was married. His wife died of cancer way too young. He's the father of 2 children. He served our country in World War II. He loved a stiff scotch at the end of the day and smoked cigarettes until he couldn't anymore. And then he chewed gum with reckless abandon because he had to do something to compensate for not having a cigarette. So when you talk about him as husband, father, veteran, but never a number, please. I mean, he fought in World War II against labeling people with numbers, you know. And they looked at me, and I'm hoping, because I wasn't mad about it, but I was shocked, the look on my face. If you make it to 30, 40, 50, 80 years, in his case, almost 90, you've earned the respect of just having figured out a way to get where you're going. That's what the storytelling and story gathering is all about. We have been so busy at the health department, I've been told, you know, we have to do the short interview. Well, the problem with that is when you call somebody and they believe and trust in you enough to answer the question, how are you feeling? I can't put a time limit on that. They're going through the worst pandemic in our lifetimes. And if they want to talk about what they're going through, that's part of the process to help them get through it. My job is to listen to them. When you have the opportunity to meet with people around the world, that's pretty cool. It's challenging. If they all showed up in Houston, that'd be great. But most likely, you're going to meet most of us in this forum online. That's not to say you can't connect with them. It's a matter of what are you going to do with the time you've got. So years ago when I was at public radio, I worked with Larry Smith of Smith Magazine. He's something called the 6 Word Memoir Project. The most famous being For Sale Baby Shoes Never Worn. And we hear it and our heart goes, oh my God, the baby died. And I've told the story enough that it could be that, but we don't know. It also could be the baby was born to a couple in Northern California and they decided that they were hippies and they didn't want him to wear shoes. So they sold a brand new pair of baby shoes. I like that story better. I'm not sure which it is. But for groups like this, when you're trying to get to know each other, you may take a meeting and just do the 6 Word Memoir Project. Now, the beauty of this is, so you tell a story, Karen, you tell a story of 6 words. Could be 6 colors, but doesn't tell us much. But it could be something that has a message in 6 words. And then the storytelling connection part of this is you ask for the backstory. So Larry Smith asked his readers to send in 6 Word memoirs. He figured he'd get a dozen, he'd publish them. Well, he got a lot more than a dozen. He's now published millions of them. And he was going around the country meeting with people, and people would show up in an auditorium to hear the 6 Word memoir and then the backstory, which is really where the connection starts. So when we're working on getting our stories and hearing from others, the willingness has to be there. And then the 1%, so you're not wasting each other's time. And then the connection takes place. You want to get to know me? I can tell you my resume. I can sit here and tell you stories about other people's stories. But you really want to know me, you need to hear a story of me that is of value. That's where we'll connect. And that way, in the next meeting you've got, or the next committee meeting you got, I wouldn't just be, oh, that's Ben, he lives in Milwaukee. It's like, oh, that's the guy who had that back issue. See, if I only have time to tell you one story about me, I will tell you this story. My whole life changed when I felt the pop in my lower back. I was 16, I was water skiing, and it led to surgery to fix the popped disc. The surgery was in 2 parts. I was 16 years old. They did 2 surgeries in a month. They took bone from my hip, fused it to my back, and put 2 rods in to straighten my spine because it was curved. And then they went through the stomach 2 weeks later, and they fused the front. Then they did what could probably be, you would think, the worst thing in the world for a 16-year-old. They put me in a body cast from my shoulders to my knees, and I spent 4 months at home in the summer healing, because today they wouldn't do that. You'd walk the next day. But then they didn't think that was a good idea. My grades went up, but everybody else was going to senior prom and dating that summer and getting excited about college, and I was just hoping to be able to walk again. It changed my entire life. I was an introvert before that summer, and I came out of the experience an extrovert. I can't tell you why, but it changed my life more than any anything else. If that's the only story I have to tell, that tells you something. Hopefully you remember it. And the next time you're meeting with me, that it's what shades your understanding of me. Each one of you could tell me a story, and I would walk away knowing you a lot more than I've written down your names. I mean, I know there's Justina and Cindy and Simon and Annette, and I go through the whole, I don't know anything about you except that you're all part of International Rotary. It is the stories that we share together, which is what builds the organization. And then when you go out into the world and they say, well, tell me something about yourself, right? When I worked at the Blood Center, almost everybody who does things talks about their golf, their gardening, home repair, but they rarely say, oh yeah, I'm a blood donor. But people who donate blood regularly are saving lives, and yet they don't promote it. So my charge there was to get people to tell part of that story. I said, that's a really important part of who you are. They just took it for granted. As you look around the screen, how many people can you look at and say, I really know something critical about them? If you do, you've done a good job of sharing story. And if you don't, it's not that hard to do. It's time and focus. What's their story? And their story should lead one of your stories. And then you've connected because you've shared the story. You've validated each other's journey. And that's really what we're trying to do, I think, in whatever endeavors we have. The idea of sex trafficking in Wisconsin, so foreign to me. And yet once I heard Dawn talk, I was a lot more sensitive to the fact that people who struggle now include in my thinking those who are in an incredible situation I never would have dreamt and certainly wouldn't have thought would be here in Wisconsin, let alone the United States. If I don't hear the story, I don't know. And the stories build knowledge, I think, in ways that are far more memorable because the stories, hopefully done well, touch us on an emotional level. That is where the connection takes place because that's where we remember things. If you just remember facts in time, they go away. If they don't come with feelings, they don't mean much to you. Okay, trying to be respectful of your time. Does anybody want to ask a question? So I don't just talk to you for my time here. If you unmute and ask it, it's better for me than if you chat, but I can do either.
One of the things that impacted me so much, Ben, when we first met all those years ago, was when you came and talked to my Rotary Club and you shared, everybody has a story, they're just waiting for someone to listen. And I have shared that, and I give you credit for that, by the way. And so many, whenever I do presentations around the state or around the Midwest, that's something that I share with my audience as well. It makes such an impact, and I carry that every day when I'm out and about talking with people and meeting people now. So thank you for the impact you've made on my life.
I appreciate that and the feedback, which helps and leads into something else I'm glad we have time for. So in the next month, many of us may be gathering with family for the holidays. If you're seeing people you haven't seen in a while, figuring out ahead of time, not scripting it, but if there's something you really want to make sure you share. So I'm going to go see my cousin Eddie and my oldest friend, and I'm only going to get an hour. I better be careful about the stories I share because I don't want to share something that means very little. I had a flat tire at the grocery store last week. Does he care? Is that an important story? No. But there may be another story that I think really is, and maybe something to do with, he's a doctor, so I probably talked to him about COVID in the health department and what a family has told me. So I think you tell your stories with purpose, right? Why is that story the one you're telling? And it doesn't mean you can only have one story to tell, but they need to be stories with purpose. What's your intention of sharing that story? With the idea that most of us don't have time to listen all afternoon. And if you do, that's great. It's rare, but it's great. I've got a friend named Joe. We sat in his backyard years ago, just for an hour, a cup of coffee on a Saturday. And his wife came out late in the afternoon. She goes, you guys have been talking for like 3 hours. Joe, I need you to do. The time flew by. We just traded stories back and forth. It was a great afternoon. Most of us don't do that for 3 or 4 hours. But even if you do it for 3 or 4 minutes, it can make a world of difference depending on what you choose to say. And more importantly, depending on how long you choose to listen to someone else. when I talk about this, people say to me, yeah, what do you do about the person who just kind of goes on and on? I have a younger brother named Josh. I tell this to you because I love him, but he can go on and on. So when I talk to him and I'm busy, let's say I talk to him at noon and I have 10 minutes. I'll say, Josh, I'm glad you called. I just want to let you know I've got a meeting in 10 minutes. So that he may not, he may still tell me stories that I don't think are all that important, but I'm giving him time to tell whatever he wants. And then I do something because we have the right to control our time as well as the storyteller. I say, you know, Josh, we're at 9 minutes. I got to go in 1 minute, wrap it up. So you have the right to, the storytelling process is a two-way venture done well. I talk about how you should interrupt somebody, not because you didn't hear what they said, but because you want to know more about what they just said. So the interruption with intention is showing how carefully you were listening. And I think that's really important too, as a communication process, that if I'm stopping you, it better not be because I totally missed what you said, because my question will show you I wasn't listening to you. That's what's rude about interruption. The interruption to clarify, that's as respectful as one can get. I saw somebody posted
Matt
here.
has a question, and Matt is another great storyteller. So I'm really curious about what your question is going to be, Matt.
Go ahead, Matt.
I want to initially just make a statement that you're speaking my language. I do a lot of presentations, and I learned from my United Nations days that 60 slides with headings and 12 bullets is a bunch of factual information, just doesn't cut it. We tune out within a period of time. And so my favorite presentation is 10 consecutive stories that are threaded together with a conclusion at the end. And it's the one that I think is most impactful, simply because, as you say, all of those kind of points related to a story encapsulate something in a way that we remember it. Because much of the way we communicate with each other is based on storytelling. When we go home and talk to our spouse, it's a story. When we're talking to our parents, it's a story. When we're talking to our kids, they're giving us stories. And the moment we kind of switch from that to something else to communicate what we want people to understand, we change the dynamic in a way that takes the clarity away. So, I think what you're saying is so relevant and so important and so much needed, to really communicate with all of us.
Thank you, Matt. I love the idea of stringing the stories together. When you can do that well, I tell people I don't have a script. I've got some notes here, but storytelling for me is like quilting. I take a piece, and I take a second piece, and I connect it. And then I take a third piece. And as long as you find a way to connect it properly, the pieces will all fit. And if you do it regularly, you make different quilts. You tell the story slightly differently. It keeps it fresh and hopefully connects for other people. Yeah.
You guys remind me of years ago, a speaker advised us as Rotarians to have an elevator speech to answer the question, why are you a Rotarian, or why do you value Rotary so much, to be able to bring that into focus and tell that story briefly, as if you're on an elevator before it gets to the bottom and everybody gets off the elevator.
Gene, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Why are you a Rotarian?
I'm a Rotarian because I have learned over time that humanitarian outreach is very rewarding to me, and Rotary is about serving the needs of others as opposed to self. And that's my inspiration to be a Rotarian.
Double thumbs up on that. That's a great answer. And the elevator, even if you only went 2 floors, I got the answer. People, a lot of us want to make a difference in the world, and we're not really sure how to do it. Rotarians are doing that. So when you are able to share with me, someone who doesn't know Rotary, about what Rotary is doing, it's pretty good, because it shows me the way. If I want to make a difference in the world, here's an option. If I don't talk to somebody in Rotary, I don't know that's an option.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you, Ben. What a great way. And I think that you've given us all an assignment.
Well, 2 things. I want to tell you one more story. But
please do.
if you want to take anything away from what we're talking about, with it, one-on-one or as a committee or as a meeting of the whole, try the 6-word memoir. It will lead to story. And again, that leads to connection. My mother was named Miriam. She was an identical twin. I was born and went home to a ranch house next door to an identical ranch house that was owned by my mom's twin sister, my Aunt Didi. My mom died of a brain tumor after 5 weeks, first symptom to burial. She was only 57. Every year, in Judaism, the anniversary of one's life goes from their birthday to their day of passing after they pass, and we celebrate their yahrzeit, their death anniversary. My 2 brothers and I, every year on May 7th, go to the cemetery and we put a blanket in front of the grave. We spray her perfume, which is Belosia, and we smell the perfume and we tell stories of Mom. It's been over 30 years. We still tell stories that keep her alive because we tell stories to each other the others didn't know. And that somehow allows us to stay connected with someone who died over 30 years ago. When I was in high school, my folks divorced when I was 6. I started in high school to send my mom and my dad Father's Day cards. I thought, Mom's kind of earned it. We see Dad on the weekends and holidays. He doesn't live but 30 miles away, but Mom's done both jobs. I got to junior or college and I realized she's never said anything about the card, and I'm wondering, have I offended her? So I didn't send a card. That July 4th, I was home for the family gathering, and she came up to me. She said, "Are you mad at me?" And I looked at her and said, "I don't think we've had a fight since I was 15. Why would I be mad at you?" She said, I didn't get my card. I said, "Your card?" She goes, "Father's Day. It's my favorite card of the year, Benny." Part of me thinks it's the one thing she knew she got her twin sister didn't get. They had identical purses, cars. I mean, they had everything. So she had something a little different than her twin sister. And I finished, and my brothers looked at me and said, "We never knew." It was a great story, and it tells us so much about Mom. Our stories allow us to keep people alive who've passed, or to spotlight parts of their lives that can impact us or those we share the story with. When it's all said and done, that's why we tell the stories, or we listen to them, so they help impact our lives and show us the way. I thank you for your time and attention. There's a lot more I'd love to say, but we've said enough for today. Thank you. Again, my email, I think it's in the chat. If you have questions, please get back to me. And to Karen, Kevin, Michelle, and Jerry, who brought me in here, and mostly Dawn, thank you so much.
Thank you, Ben. And yeah, it has been, what a great way to start kind of our holiday season as we think about it. As we move into Hanukkah and Christmas, what a great way. So we have an assignment. Ben has given us an assignment, and I saw Michelle taking notes. So I'm sure that the program committee will be scheduling a session of utilizing one of our meetings for us to share our 6-word memoir. I love that. For people like me who love to talk, limiting it to 6 words is going to be really hard, but I'll try. So